I often find it interesting to look at various different spheres of life to see what wisdom people use in order to make a success of things there. And one of the things that I often like to look at is sport. And I'd say probably the most successful football manager there's been in recent times, like within the last 20 or so years, was the Manchester United manager, Alex Ferguson. I'm not actually a supporter of Manchester United, so in some ways it pains me to admit that, but certainly I'd say he was the most successful football manager of recent times, the last 20 odd years or so. And he had a mantra, a 3-word mantra that he would cling to in order to help him become successful and to help his teams become successful. And it really worked for them. They won an awful lot under his leadership. And so I wanted to share what that was, because I think, as often in these things, it's applicable to life. And the mantra that Ferguson used to cling to was the phrase, control the controllables. So whenever he was in any situation where he had to decide what to do, he would often say this, control the controllables. And a really good example of this is when his team were in a championship, a title battle, where each team is playing a game, then their main rivals would play a game, and then his team would play a game, and then their main rivals would play a game, and they're trying to allot points to see who ends up with the most points at the end of the year, and it's a real mental battle. He was asked this one season, so did you stay in and watch your rivals on Sunday on the TV? And his answer was really interesting, because he said, well, why on earth would I do that? I've got no influence over it. He said, no, I didn't watch it. I went for a game of golf instead. And it's an interesting approach, isn't it? Because I imagine there's a lot of people who would have chosen to watch their rival's game, because the result has a bearing on Ferguson's team and his hopes and his ambitions. But because he couldn't do anything about it, and he had no influence over it, he realised that the score would be the same in that match involving his rivals, whether he watched it or not. And so he made the decision not to. And he would spare himself all the grief and anxiety and attachment that would last for the better part of 2 hours, and go out instead and have a game of golf with his friends. And so as I ponder this, I'm thinking, I wonder what would happen if we did the same. I wonder if we just focused on controlling the controllables, even focused on recognising what were the controllables and what are the things that are outside of our control, like that football match that he had no part in, that we can just kind of let go of. What difference would it make if we did actually simply decide to control the controllables and let the other stuff go? Well, for Ferguson, the difference that it made to him is he had a much more pleasant Sunday. Rather than being focused on this tumultuous game of football that he had no control over, yes, he had a nice Sunday afternoon with his friends playing golf in the sunshine. So what would it be like for us, I wonder? What are the things that we would drop were we to stop trying to control things that are actually outside of our control? And I'd invite you to notice, in order to pick up that skill of what is controllable and what is not controllable, become aware of it in daily life, and you'll notice yourself trying to control things that are actually not controllable in the strangest of places. So I'll give you an example where I saw this show up in my life. I was on a bus one day and I needed to catch another bus. So I needed to get off this one at the next stop in time to catch a connecting bus that was going to come. And I was stood there because it was my stop, but my bus stop was the other side of these traffic lights. And I can see the traffic lights are on green, but we're still a little bit away. And the bus driver's very relaxed, he's just trundling away. And of course, I'm worried about not connecting to my second bus. And so I'm really attached to the idea of us getting through these traffic lights on green rather than missing the traffic lights and being held up at them for a good few minutes. At which point, looking at my watch, I could see I could well miss my bus. And so what did I do? I stood there and I invested a whole heap of energy silently going to the bus driver. Come on, get through the lights, come on, get through the lights. And just in that moment, I was actually spending, like I say, a lot of mental energy trying to control something that I had absolutely no control over. Those lights were going to change when the lights were programmed to change. And the bus driver was going at that speed because that's the speed limit. And so there I was, just urging with every fibre that the bus should speed up, urging with every fibre that the traffic lights should stay on green so I could get to the other side. And of course, you know what happened. The traffic lights changed to amber and changed to red, and there we were, stuck there at the traffic lights. And so you'll never imagine what I did then. I started investing all of that energy. Come on, urging the traffic lights to change. And it goes back to that distinction, two different approaches to when you don't have control over something. It can be kind of panic because everything's out of control, or like the Buddhists say, relax, everything's out of control. And when I think back to me stood at on that bus, waiting at the traffic lights, urging this machine that is pre-programmed to change back to green so we could go again in the hope that I could get this second connecting bus, I'm reminded of how unpleasant it was in that moment for me to be putting so much energy and attention and every fibre of my being trying to will something that wasn't actually in my control. And so I wonder what else we start to notice is actually outside of our sphere of influence. I wonder what difference it would make to our lives if, when we spotted those things that are out of control, if when we spotted the football match that has a bearing on our hopes and dreams but we can't influence, or when we notice the traffic light that is pre-programmed and is currently holding up the vehicle that we're on, what difference does it make to just let go of that? What difference does it make to just accept the fact that this is outside of your control and let it be? It's an interesting idea to play with, isn't it? Because when I think back to Ferguson, the football manager, not only did he have a nicer Sunday by playing golf with his friends rather than watching a match and getting invested in a match he had actually no control over, but I bet that he actually was able there to recharge his batteries and be far better equipped to tackle the things that he does have control over. And so when he showed up for work on the Monday and had issues that were under his control, I bet he wasn't so frazzled or burned out. I bet he was in a much better mental state to be able to tackle the things that were under his purview, simply because he'd let the things outside of his control and he'd let go of them. So that's my invite to you to ponder. What are the things that are outside your control, and how would you change the way you live your life if you really, really focused on simply controlling the controllables and putting all your influence and all your power into the things that you can actually make a difference on, and letting the rest go. Just a little experiment, see what comes up for you. So if you find this idea useful, then feel free to share it to your family and friends. You can subscribe to the podcast for free wherever you get your podcasts. You can also go to sliceoftherapy.com if you prefer to watch them on YouTube. And you could work with me directly. I'm Alun Parry, and I'm the director of the Liverpool Psychotherapy practice. And you can find me on the internet at liverpoolpsychotherapy.co.uk. So thanks for listening, and I'll be back again tomorrow.